Hello everyone again. I'm here with Diogo. I'm really excited about it. Diogo has joined us at NEAR Foundation Council as a chairperson, and I'm really excited about this. But before we dive into that, let's get Diogo to introduce himself and how did you get to crypto? What has been, some of the interesting story of kind of how you started Anchorage and what Anchorage is now.
Well, hi everyone. Great to meet you. Thank you for welcoming me to the NEAR ecosystem and community. It's been pretty fun, even though kind of crazy past month and a half, 2 months. It's also, I love the description, how I was introduced, which is friend and colleague. I love that. That's how I should be introduced every single time. Okay, so for those of you that don't know me, I'm actually pretty odd duck in crypto. I work on the dark side of crypto, which is CeFi. My name is Diogo Mónica. I'm the founder of a company called Anchorage Digital. Anchorage Digital is as boring as crypto companies can come. In fact, we have a pretty cool claim, which is we are the first and still only federally chartered bank in the US. That means that Anchorage actually has, I don't know that that's cool, but I think so. So it's the same charter as JP Morgan Chase. So if JP Morgan Chase is a bank, they're a bank because they have a charter by the OCC, which is the oldest bank regulator in the United States, Office of the Control of the Currency, and we have the exact same charter. So we're a bank like JP Morgan Chase is a bank, which is pretty exciting for crypto because we were the first ones to do, and it legitimizes crypto, and it really brought crypto into the banking system. We custody crypto assets in a bank inside of traditional finance. That's really cool. It's also extremely painful, as you'd imagine, because compliance is bank compliance. The interesting thing about how Anchorage Digital was started is that my intent from the beginning with my co-founder Nathan was never to really create a bank per se. Our goal was, as two security engineers that we were, really building a solution to a problem that we had at the time. And the problem that was at the time was that all these crypto funds and venture funds were being created because of the ICO boom. They were investing in these weird digital assets that were held in self-custody based on private keys, which, as you know, are glorified passwords, and they were losing them. So the way that Anchorage got started actually was a fund in 2017 that came to me because they had lost the passphrase to a $1.5 million Bitcoin wallet, and they offered me 20% if I could break into it. And that's how I got introduced to the business. What a great business model. People give you money and you get to keep 20%. There's no blockchain that keeps 20% fee, at least that I know of. So that's how the business actually got started and the fun part of that. Of course, my background is a little bit different in that and how I got there. We can talk about it if it's interesting. But that's how Anchorage actually got started, was technical security, two security engineers coming together to really store private keys.
Yeah, and I think that's extremely important, as you said, to legitimize crypto, to bring it to people who either not planning to do self-custody or don't know how to do it, or have a lot of money, which requires a way higher kind of bar for compliance and control over the system, right? Because it's totally normal to store some amount of money on your phone with normal access, but you definitely don't want to do that with millions of dollars, and especially with billions.
That's right, and the interesting thing is that I also see this in your path to crypto and the AI papers and things like that, which is actually pretty fascinating. But there's this massive amount of luck of just being in the right place at the right time. So it's kind of fascinating because 15 years ago, I was working on something that was absolutely useless at the time, just absolutely useless. I was doing a PhD in something called distributed systems that nobody cared about. And I was publishing papers on something that I called computational resource tests, and that now we call the way better marketing term proof of work. And so marketing matters deeply, number one. Number two, I was working on Hashcash, doing Sybil protection. I was doing distributed systems and just doing security in this space. And it was just absolutely an academic pursuit. And it's kind of absolutely fascinating to think through reading a paper, reading Practical Byzantine Fault Tolerance by Miguel Castro, or reading Paxos, or reading some of the seminal Byzantine general papers, or all of these. And just 15 years ago, 17 years ago, they were just
ideas, pretty much.
Intellectual discussions between PhD students and professors in universities trying to get papers published in conferences that nobody has ever heard of. Well, now they probably have, because all the VCs are just trawling the pages of all the publishers of all these conferences in both AI and crypto conferences. But Eurocrypt, how many people had heard about Eurocrypt? DSN, how many people had heard about DSN? Nobody cared about these conferences, and they were the conferences of distributed systems. So I was just lucky enough to have been interested from security from a very early age, and security really was my passion. Well, when I was 12 or 13, hacking into my friends' computers was my passion. But that's what led to the passion of security, of course, eventually. And that's what got me on that path, is kind of fascinating. You can describe Anchorage as many different things. Sure, we're a crypto company. Yeah, you can describe us as a crypto company. But you can also easily describe us as a security infrastructure company. You can also easily describe us as a bank. I personally like to describe us as a tech company that owns a bank, not as a bank that does tech, because those two things are very different, as you might expect. Even though we do have enough compliance people to call ourselves a real bank, so you have that as a stat for you.
I'm sorry for that.
No, it's necessary, and it's actually fascinating. One of the things that I found the most fascinating has been, well, there's many things here, but I'm both an American citizen because I was born in the US, but I'm actually Portuguese too. I grew up in Portugal. And I just moved back to Lisbon about 6 weeks ago. So, my life is back and forth. But when things get hard in Portugal, I say I'm American, and when it get shitty in the US, I say I'm Portuguese. So I'm always like switching hats and like using different shirts to claim that both countries are amazing. Every time in the US somebody complains about IDs and like how the system is bureaucratic and you need papers, I talk about our citizens card and digital signatures, and then people there talk about like starting a company, and then, or people here talk about starting a company, and I complain about the bureaucracy, and I complain about all of the, things that Portuguese people just force you to do anything. Anyway, it's pretty funny. But one of the things that has been the most fascinating for me as an American citizen has been interacting with not just the regulators, but the government apparatus. Going to the White House, meeting senators, seeing how the sausage gets made is kind of scary. Seeing the lobbying, participating in the lobbying, getting lobbyists, actually being part of the system and seeing how things actually evolve is kind of scary, concerning, and as a citizen, you just look at it and it's like, okay, I thought this was a rumor. I thought the ways the things actually work were just
more process to the chaos, but
yeah, and or something that people described as a conspiracy theory, that this is actually how things were, and then you get there and there's, oh no, it actually works this way. Okay, cool.
So now you're in Lisbon. That's pretty much your conclusion of that after you interacted with all the U.S. government.
Well, yeah, there are downsides on both sides, but the story of Anchorage also is kind of interesting because it was started in San Francisco in my living room, and pre-pandemic we were actually 70-something people, and then we wake up in a world post-pandemic, and the West Coast, which was, San Francisco specifically, was 95% of Anchorage employees. Not Bay Area. San Francisco was 95% of Anchorage employees. And we've never really been pro-remote. I've always thought that I wasn't a good enough manager to really hire and manage a remote team. So, we had this founder philosophy that just remote was not something we were interested in. And at the time, we were able to implement it because it was pre-pandemic. The pandemic hits, and all of a sudden what happens is what happened to all of you. But we wake up in a world where we had over 300 people, and the large majority of them were not just San Francisco, not Bay Area at all. So we go from 95% San Francisco to less than 20% Bay Area. And Portugal actually now has almost half of our engineering. So we have almost 100 people in Portugal. And so obviously I have affinity to the country. I studied in these universities. This is where I did my bachelor's, my master's, my PhD. I had the connectivity. I had the teachers. I knew I could actually there's not that many Portuguese unicorns who can get the marketing going to hire good engineers and good people, and we did that successfully. And so we ended up with almost 100 people in Portugal, which then brings me back to Portugal because obviously the time zone, it's not like everybody's in the US and I'm here. And I think you've done similar things, right? You found pockets of talent.
Yeah, I mean, we went from, I don't know, we had 20-something people, and one, actually, Jake here, was remote, and then we went, like everybody remote, kind of growing, and then also separating and decentralizing and becoming more and more of a collective that's global, that has people everywhere, that has hubs everywhere, and now it's, actually this time zone indeed is kind of the middle ground between Asia and America, and you can actually cover it very well. And so I think that has been also like an interesting question, yeah, like if you are in Asia or in US, like you actually are kind of missing out on part of this, and versus here you have like a wide range as well.
So I'm actually curious because we sell to institutions, so our clients are Visa, sovereign wealth funds, big banks. Every single venture fund you've ever heard of is a client. So we have tens of billions of dollars on the platform, and we do staking, custody, buy and sell. Those are our services. Those are our clients. We do not touch retail. We do not touch retail. We don't do retail. We don't want to do retail, so we don't touch it. And that's part of the secret of actually having a bank that is a bank is because we were institutional only, so that helps because from a regulatory perspective, the target is not on you. There's no poor retail ever being hurt because we just don't serve them, and the institutions are sophisticated. So if they do something wrong and invest in a bad asset and they lose all their funds, nobody's going to be sad about some poor institution that invested their money, still made fees but lost their funds. So it's a very different thing. But for foundations, I've always kept myself credibly neutral from an asset perspective, so this is actually the first foundation that I'm joining. And at this point, we're big enough for me not to be close to the decision-making on asset support, for this to actually be something that I can do credibly. But I've always wondered whether for protocols and for foundations, it is an advantage to actually be remote and distributed, because the community building is such a big portion of it, that being in the pockets and actually being close, that must be a massive advantage versus, I don't know, vis-a-vis a protocol that is just like 95% San Francisco. Is that the case?
Yeah, I think it's the case, and it's also part of philosophy, and it's part of how you build a team. It's part of people also want to meet somebody who works kind of in a core team or in a close to core team, and having people everywhere that are core people allows to also have these interactions more often. And then I think like we've seen this for kind of more local blockchain that kind of launched for a specific country, like that really hard for them to break out of that mode, right? Because it becomes kind of self-fulfilling, and blockchains are at the core global phenomena. It's at the core a place to unite everyone, to build this composable platforms, bring everybody together, create open markets that are global in the first place. And so whenever you target something local, either by the team location or by kind of just your marketing and market positioning, you are kind of actually crossing yourself out from this whole global phenomena that blockchain is. And I think that is really important piece. And at the same, like the philosophy of open web, the one we really kind of pushing for, is really around allowing everyone in, allowing kind of people to participate, to contribute. Doesn't matter where you are. Doesn't matter. I love to say, if you're an account on chain, it doesn't matter if you're a cat, right? Like you could be participating in exactly the same terms. And so, like I think like opening that up is important, and geography then doesn't matter. Time zones do, sadly. That's probably. I wish there was no time zones and we can all live in the same time. And
maybe we can start by getting rid of daylight savings.
Yeah, that would be
slow
nice.
progress.
Yeah.
Now there you go. This is my beginning of my political campaign here for Prime Minister of Portugal.
For UN, I think.
Or UN directly. Actually, I have another question for you. Sorry, I know you were supposed to be interviewing me, but we had dinner last night, and I had this one. This is a spicy take, and I've been thinking about this for a while, and I just love your opinion. And since we're chatting with a great group of people, might as well think through this. But this is a spicy take, so take me here for a minute. Give me a break here. But I have this idea that one of the reasons why lots of protocols have failed in our space, and why we've had maybe not enough engagement from both community and founders, has been because for a space that believes deeply in incentive alignment, we've always built these protocols with massive misalignment of incentives for the founder specifically. And what I mean by that is, I think this space will not work as successful as it could until new protocols that are created, that are based on any kind of token or any kind of incentive, have token lockups, investing that is actually equal or similar to any other founder that is creating a company and raising equity. If I'm a founder raising dollars, we've raised almost $500 million. $500 would be also pretty impressive. $500 million, And there's no liquidity. There's no liquidity for 7 to 10 years. That's the average for an equity company. The founders stay, the workers stay, everybody stays. So how is it possible to really build a fundamentally successful protocol if you get liquidity on year 1 or year 2 or year 3? It's not just that the founders lose interest necessarily, it's that they're not really incentivized to stay. And a lot of people I've seen, became fabulously wealthy. And then you also have the negative component that I actually saw Square post-IPO go through, which is once the stock and your price and your net worth is public, you're looking at it every day, and your loss aversion means that days that it's up, you don't feel anything, you feel normal, but days that it's down, you feel really bad. And so that loss aversion of like feeling lost 2x, then the gains actually is like very corrosive, and in crypto this happens. But I legitimately think until token founders specifically, but also employees, have a vesting schedule that is actually closer to an equity in terms of timeline, say 7 years, I don't think we're going to get past through the really, really hard stuff of product building and like go-to-market. I would love to hear your opinion on this.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth around that the kind of fast liquidity is corrosive, not just for the team, but also for the backers who participate, because it's also like now they look at it as well, and like now they're like, now it's a trade for them, not just backing and kind of, building for the future. So I think this has been probably a big negative side of the space. We actually, for our team, kind of everyone have set up, first of all, the lockup started at mainnet. So there was motivation for everyone to actually launch mainnet. So even though like the kind of the normal vesting, right, like employee vesting, but or contributor vesting, but the lockup started from this, and then it was pretty much 4 years from mainnet. So it actually didn't end yet, and it was like kind of aligned with like the longest backers as well. So and so. I definitely, like, we've been trying to maximize that pretty much as possible. I do think that, like, for projects that are launching now, if they have an ability to do that and kind of, I think the problem is, and like I think this is general problem with crypto has been, is that like because of the market dynamics, it's the same as like in 21, there was like people were shooting money from the guns. Right, like instead of T-shirt, it was like a 500K grant.
In Portugal, I think we call it the bazooka.
Yeah. And so like that kind of created this whole slice of people who believe this is normal, right? And so the same with like crypto incentives and like crypto VCs as well. There's a whole slice of people who think this is normal. Like the only thing that is like worth investing is in the token that will be liquid for them in a year. Like they actually put provisions into like some of the contract. So I think the challenge right now is like we kind of need to change the market dynamics in general, such that founders are able to like create the equal opportunity for both them and backers to have kind of a more aligned, like building out a real future value. And I think like I'm not sure how we can actually get there at the current stage, right? I think that's really the challenge, is like the market adjustments is happening. I think like the valuation adjusting, but that structures are still more short term than they should be. But in general, I totally agree. I think the biggest kind of the core team continued pushing together, continue working is the most important. And we have like some people who transition out, but a lot of people are still in the ecosystem working across different hubs. And that's, I think, one of the benefits is compared to a company, when somebody transitions off, they go and do something else. And the ecosystem, there's a lot of things to do. And you can actually go and do something in the ecosystem, continue growing it in a different capacity, right? Maybe you don't like the role you were in, you maybe want to try something else. So you have this opportunity to continue growing the ecosystem, but not maybe indirectly like the employee relationship that you started with. And I think that is being actually beneficial for continuing growing in an ecosystem.
Okay, that's interesting. Well, at least for any companies that we fund, we can always think about things like that and aligning the incentives.
Yeah, I think, I mean, as we work with founders, and I'm really excited kind of within this context, working with founders, helping them set up a structure that maximizes kind of their success in building their vision, right? At the end, like that's why you start. Like if you're for financial outcome, there's better, for many of the smart founders, there's better ways to have a short-term financial outcome, including investment actually, for time spent on building this, for sweats building this. And so like, you're starting the company because you want to bring this vision together. And so I think like structuring it in such a way where you as a founder are able to continue pushing forward. There's ways to like, the benefit is the tokens is just information. And the market is just another piece of information, right? And so you can structure the token in a way that can be, useful for your, incentive structures, for decentralizing the ecosystem, for onboarding new people, while the incentive part for the team, et cetera, can be structured as well. It's just code, right? You can write the code. That's a benefit compared to equity. Equity is like, it's kind of predefined, right? And it has yes, you actually can, sit down with lawyers and write 500 pages of documents, but then you need to also execute it. It's like super complicated, explain to everyone. Here you can just write a smart contract that exactly outlines the motivations that you want, right? You can maximize, for example, unlock based on KPIs, right? It can be that, that we actually align the whole ecosystem to achieve some specific goal. And now it's actually a kind of positive sum game for everyone to push toward that, right? And in a way, that's what kind of Bitcoin started with. Like it says, everybody's incentivized to continue building this chain. It's just like, that was a very simple KPI. Let's build the longest chain, and hopefully it's going to be useful. But you can have a lot more complex things. Now we have oracles that can provide you with information. You can have an AI oracle that actually analyzing potentially information about the projects that you're building, that's providing this context back into your token to unlock or provide additional emissions based on that, right? So like you can design things that are kind of more novel, and I think that is the benefit of this technology that we have, is like we have such a programmability that we never had before.
I saw a lot of the companies in the ecosystem, and I've been kind of meeting a lot of these CEOs and these founders, and something that has struck me as interesting that I haven't seen yet is I've seen a lot of applications of zero-knowledge proofs within our own space. So, on the roll-ups and trying to make things more efficient and effective, which makes a ton of sense because we want lower fees, we want higher throughput, we want just better ways and just stronger primitives to achieve things that we couldn't before. I haven't actually seen great zero-knowledge proof applications that are Bitcoin-based. For things that I would have thought are obvious and are kind of needed, I don't know, there's a cool paper by Bonnet, which you take a picture now, the Sony cameras actually have...
the cryptographic key in them,
Right, they have a cryptographic key, and then they sign every picture that comes from a camera, so you know if a picture actually comes from a war zone or if it was generated by DALL-E. You have no idea. And so it actually signs the picture. But then the problem is, you're a media outlet, and you either put the full picture, 50 whatever megabytes of picture, because that's the original picture that got signed, was the raw format of the picture. And so how can we crop it? How can we reduce it in size? And so there's these cool ways to prove in zero knowledge that a subset of a picture or a subversion of the picture actually sign up to the original picture that came from the camera. So cool utility like that we can actually know if pictures coming from Gaza are actually from Gaza, or from Israel are actually from Israel. Like, we don't know what the source of these things are. And it's very important for us to have great information. And so that's an interesting use case in application. And then obviously like the use of something like Near, in which is very cheap for me to actually do these commitments and have somebody like Sony or Nikon or whatever participate, seems like a very obvious use case. Why have I not seen, not this specific use case, because I'm likely missing something trivial that does make it work, but just zero knowledge use cases that are just obviously like great for humanity and society, kind of like implemented right now.
I think, the reality is like this technology just started to scale to something that's like reasonably like powerful, right? Like imagine, what you just described, the use case of converting a 50 megabyte image down to, let's say, 300 kilobytes, right? And usually it's done by, set of filters and maybe potentially some like neural network as well now. And 50 megabytes is actually a lot of data that the current zero-knowledge circuits probably cannot handle, right? And especially the zero-knowledge circuits of last year could not handle at all. So we actually just getting to a stage where it's possible to start pushing this much data or this much compute, right? So for example, for ZKML, and I think there's a hackathon project actually going to present an example of that. Like ZKML right now, the limitation is on how much, usually all the neural networks have layers, And so, because like every layer, you can prove it individually and then compress all the proofs of each layer. So it doesn't matter how many layers it has, but the amount of parameters each layer outputs, right? The matrix it outputs, you need to prove that, and you need to commit on that. And that is actually expensive. And so right now, I think it's like 10 million parameters is the max you can have, right? Which is 10 megabyte or like kind of 40 megabytes, for example, right? So like we're just getting to that stage where this is the size that's possible. But I think this use case is extremely important, and also like it wasn't really well understood that we need this prior to some of the recent events and like kind of just more generative AI resurgence. I think that is kind of in general like content tracking, content understanding, reputation of the entities publishing will become extremely important, and having like this supply chain of data and zero knowledge proofs with it will become extremely important component of that. But like more of this use case will be coming as this technology scales, and like not just scales, but also becomes more effective and efficient. There's hardware accelerators that are also being built. So like I think we just getting to see it coming, but it's like it was not like I mentioned and with Jordi. Like in 19, we actually banned word zero knowledge because it didn't you could use it for everything, but it didn't work.
Right.
And so now it's actually like we're investing in it, partnering across the ecosystem, and I think we'll see a lot more exciting stuff for this.
Awesome. Well, if somebody wants to build a company like that, I know somebody at Sony, so I don't know.
There might be some funding for you, yeah.
I think we just ran out of time.
Indeed, we did. All right. Well, thank you. Hopefully, you met Diogo, and yeah. Exciting to be here. Thank you, Diogo.
No problem.